Hey, everybody, good morning. Welcome to this last little episode of Faith Press before the end of the year. And we head into Advent. And speaking of Advent, which begins in a couple weeks, I've been walking through this little book, Being with God. And the reverse truth of Advent is that God wants to be with us. And it's just incredible that as we seek to be with God, we are met by a God who already longs to be with us. And so we're about to head into that season, and I'm really excited. Before we get there, I just want to conclude this from this little book, just some invitations to be with God, particularly as we move into the Advent season and things get crazy and schedules get nuts, parties are all over the map, and it just can turn into kind of a frenzy of a season if we're not careful. There's this passage that I'm really moved by. It comes from Isaiah 30:15, and the prophet writes this: "By waiting and calm you shall be saved. In quiet and trust lies your strength." That's the verse that I just sit with right now in the morning. Our discipleship little school called Disciple Immersion at St. Peter's, we've been practicing this for the last few weeks of sitting with this verse in stillness prayer. And it's just, by waiting and calm you shall be saved. In quiet and trust lies your strength. And that's a passage that we just kind of say over and over as we sit with God in the morning during our devotional time. And what happens is it takes about 15 minutes. There's so many layers that we build up in our life that it takes about 15 minutes to get through those layers down to the core of our being and who we are in our essence. And a lot of times we just kind of live in those outer layers of life, and we call that living. And yet there's so much depth to you. God puts so much depth into the sort of soul of who you are. And we often live from the veneer of the flesh and from the veneer of our desires and what we want and our ego and all of that other stuff. And so I find that when it comes to this kind of prayer, it's really hard because every time you sit to do this, you have to work through those layers to get down, down, down deeper into the core of who you are and what it is that you long for. Like, I remember Jesus asking someone one time when they were asking him for something. He said, "What do you want?" And I don't think he was saying, like, what do you want in, like, on the surface level, like a core level. I think he's saying, what do you want in life? What do you really want me for? And I think those are really good questions for us to get clear about. God, what is it that we really want? And to do that requires time and intention of being still, being in prayer, being in solitude, and getting clear, like, Lord, who am I? And what am I here for? And what do I long for? And so stillness prayer is just a way to do that. So what I want to do is just invite you in this last one into a simple practice. When you go to pray, if you're like me, you get all these thoughts that just flood your mind. Imagine yourself as you close your eyes and you're sitting up, not laying down because it'll be tempting to fall asleep. As you're sitting up in a chair, I sit in a rocking chair. I want you to imagine yourself sitting on a float going down a lazy river. And as you do that, you'll notice on the banks of the river on each side, you'll see all sorts of good things. You know, there'll be that party that's coming up later in the week, or those people that you know and that you love, and that email you need to return. All of these things on the banks that are just part of life. But the goal is not to get off the boat while you're praying, not to get off the raft and go see those things on the banks. The goal is to stay on the river, to let those thoughts go by, and to stay committed to being with God in that moment. So set a timer, 12, 15 minutes. Imagine yourself floating down a lazy river, and at the end of that river is the heart of God. And so you don't want to get off the banks for all of these things on the side. You want to stay committed to that time in prayer. And so as you'll sit in stillness prayer, you'll notice it's really hard to do because there's so many temptations to go in so many different directions. Just return to your prayer, whether it's that Isaiah 30:15, or whether it's the word shalom, or whether it's the Jesus prayer, whatever that is that just gives your mind something to chew on while you're sitting in stillness with God, and just allow yourself to be carried along. And so I think the invitation is this as we move to Advent. The God who came to be with us is the God who's inviting us to be with him. And so I pray that in this season to come, you would make space to be with a God who loves you and longs to be with you. So create space for stillness, create space for silence, and watch what God does with all of the anxiety and stress in your life as you discover new realms of peace and beauty throughout the course of your day. Grace and peace, my friends.